Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It seems the opposition now has exhausted itself on the debate, and I intend to exercise my right to close the debate. So I'm going to take up the concluding remarks based on the comments that were made so far. No, thank you. Madam Speaker, I've tried to take into consideration some of the comments that are made by the opposition. And I want to bring up in particular, Madam Speaker, the member from Castries South, who continues to bring lies and deceit to this House, Madam Speaker. And I want to specifically make reference, Madam Speaker, to a comment that he made where he said that this was the largest deficit that was brought to this House that he is known of. And you know, Madam Speaker, what I don't understand about my learned friend from Castries South is why he continues to insist on making statements that are so easily verifiable, so easily to be able to correct, Madam Speaker. So when I look into it, and I look at the fact, Madam Speaker, that this year we have in our estimates Madam Speaker, which was submitted for this budget. Oh, sorry. Estimates. We have in our estimates, Madam Speaker, that for the budget of 2017 and 2018, Madam Speaker, that the overall financing that was going to be required was $345,431,227. We also had an overall deficit, surplus, of $220,918,204. But we don't have to go back too far in history, Madam Speaker. In fact, we only have to go back to 2015 and 2016, which is in fact the third budget that they presented. The third budget. So it means that whatever ills that there were in the economy, Madam Speaker, they had 3 budgets to be able to rectify those ills. And we can honestly say that you would have felt the impact of this great policy that they were proclaiming to have, that they would have been able to see the benefit by the 3rd year. But, Madam Speaker, in 2015-2016, the financing required by that said government was $346,454,898 compared to the $345. So $1 million more than they currently have. So all the comments you hear, and it was amazing to listen to the last speaker from Labrie, talking about the ills of a deficit budget. And talking about that if you have a deficit government, what it was going to do to the plight of the people of this country. And more importantly, to undermine the viability of the private sector in this country. That's what he said. But if you take from 2005 until the end of 2006, and you recommence again in 2011-12, all the way through, the only thing that the Labour Party did was run a deficit government. That's all they did. They didn't know how to do anything else, Madam Speaker. That's all they knew how to do. But it's amazing all of a sudden the level of enlightenment that the opposition seems to have gained in opposition. The same things that people were pointing out to them, Madam Speaker, the whole time. They couldn't understand. And that they could come to this house and make the allegation that this is the largest deficit ever presented in this house, when you only have to go back 2 years to disprove that. But that is the kind of thing I've become accustomed to, and all of us in St. Lucia have become accustomed to. The Labour Party doesn't say what is right, they say what suits them. In order to make the shoe fit, they give you a sales job. The Labour Party continuously misunderstands or deliberately misunderstands that the criticism that we have of them is that sometimes they have great ideas. And I don't know whether those are genuinely good ideas, or the fact is that they walk around and somebody gives them a good idea and they say, boy, let me take that up and let me carry that as a mantle and as a mantra of the Labour Party. But we continuously to joke on this side, or people appear to think that we're joking when we say that the Labour Party suffers from labour pains. None of those ideas can they bring them to fruition. So when the members on the other side talk about the projects, Sabusha, Black Bay, Royalton, or Harbour Club, who do they think they're fooling? In the case of Black Bay, negotiations and an agreement on an MOU was finalized in 2014. In 2014. Yet, Madam Speaker, on the eve of election in 2016, in fact, to be exact, 4 days before the elections, on June 2nd, is when they signed the agreement. And when the member from Labrie wants to talk about access to lands or concerns, okay. When the members on the other side, Madam Speaker, want to continuously talk about projects, the fact is that they have difficulty in bringing them to fruition. And I was making the example of Black Bay. That negotiations started at the beginning of 2014, and a conclusion, including the approval of the Attorney General, was later in 2014. So he's so concerned about the unemployed people in the South that you would have thought that they would have done everything to have expedited the project. That's how much they love the project. That's how much they embrace the project. But instead, Madam Speaker, on the eve of elections, so remember, there was a document that came to the House that said that Cabinet had empowered the Prime Minister to make whatever decisions he wanted in the name of Cabinet. So that's an occasion in which he exercised that right. And this is when we talk about are people genuine in their concerns. So on one hand, the member from Labrie is concerned that we're leasing 200 acres of land at $1 an acre per year, versus the fact that they agreed to sell the Black Bay lands, sell them, not lease them, sell them for $3 EC a square foot. Anybody in the South knows that if you go to invest St. Lucia, Madam Speaker, Nobody is being offered for the development of their farmlands to be able to buy lands for $3 a square foot. I don't believe that anybody is being offered who is poor the opportunity to buy land for $3 a square foot. And you want us to take you sincerely? That we're supposed to sit on this side and believe that we can take the advice of the other members, when in fact that their behavior is completely opposite? What prevented them from getting Sabasha off the ground? Their idea. How come the project didn't start? Even politically, they must have known that their candidate was in trouble, that they needed to beef up their visibility and their credibility in Choiseul. Because how else can you explain that the Labour Party lost Choiseul and Saltibus by one of the greatest margins that anybody had won previously? In fact, I want to congratulate the member from Choiseul and Saltibus, Mr. Bradley Felix. And the things they did to try to convince and to prevent Bradley from running. So it tells me that they knew they were in trouble. And any kind of real politician would have said, let us expedite the project. You had the investor, it was your idea. But even under those circumstances, Madam Speaker, they couldn't deliver. Labor pains. Maybe they just had an epidural. Harbor Club. Harbor Club is a project I know very, very well. I remember when the gentleman came to St. Lucia. I did not know him. He bought a home in Marigot Bay. He bought the Sunset Harbor land in receivership from the Singer Freelander Bank. And his only intention, Madam Speaker, and maybe he feels like he should have listened to himself now, his only intention was to build a dive center for his son. And I remember discussing with him and meeting with him to say to him that the land is too valuable. That dive centers cannot survive by themselves because most of the hotels also have their own dive programs. And he came back to me weeks later and he said, Alan, I'm going to build a hotel. And he went to Claude Guillaume, may he rest in peace, and started the design. And in fact, he signed an agreement with Coco Palm. And that Coco Palm and a Harbor Club were going to do joint marketing and we were going to share in our senior management. I say that not to brag, but I know the project intimately. And I remember when the government announced the Citizenship by Investment program, and Mr. Buchler simply wanted residency. Because every time he was coming in and out of St. Lucia, despite the amount of money he'd invested in a house, he had already put down a dive center and was now going to spend over $60 million US on building a hotel. He was required to get multiple entries. So after the 6 weeks, he'd have to leave to go about it again. And the government said to him, just go and get a citizenship by investment. He said, no, I don't want to become a citizen of St. Lucia. All I want is that I can be a resident and that I can come in and out. When he spoke about the amount of money that he was paying on VAT, despite the fact he was given duty-free concessions, so over $2.5 million in taxes, yet he was supposed to be tax-free. And the problem that he was having, Madam Speaker, is that because the company was not up and running, he could not become VAT registered, and in not being VAT registered, he could not claim back his VAT. And these were all flaws that were brought up in the process, to which the government ignored him. Because from the moment that the government found out that Alan Chastanet was involved in the project became non-existent. And you know what's amazing, Madam Speaker? is that I wish that we could have another 100 Daniel Buchlers to come to St. Lucia. Another 100. Because here's a man that despite other international construction firms giving him great deals, he said no. I've come to St. Lucia. I want to use St. Lucian contractors. And the same contractor that built the expansion of his home, who then built the dive center, he invested in that St. Lucian. So the crane that you see on the outside, Daniel Buchler gave him the funds to be able to buy the crane. All the scaffolding that you see around the building, all the modern technologies, Mr. Buchler is the one that financed that, not for a foreign entity, but for a local entity. And I say that because at the same time that that construction was taking place, Madam Speaker, we had Royalton. And when I make these comments about Royalton, I'm not criticizing Royalton. I'm simply making an observation in that we must rectify the situation. So while Royalton was being constructed, 50% of the workers from Royalton came from outside St. Lucia. That's the difference. That's the difference when you're completely committed to making it that it's a win-win situation. But I'll say to you that it cost Mr. Buchler a lot of money to do it that way. We then talk about Royalton. The Labour Party wants to talk about how great they are that they brought Royalton to the table. Here's the truth, Madam Speaker. What brought Royalton to the table was an opportunity because of the failure of Smugglers Beach. For the third time, Smugglers Beach went into receivership, Madam Speaker. And in fact, in the last occasion, the Bank of St. Lucia was the main financier. If I'm not mistaken, the Bank of St. Lucia lent Smugglers for both capital and outstanding interest payments. I believe the amount was close to $47 million, Madam Speaker. And the project was sold for $15 million. Okay? That's a good deal. So in fact, the property was sold for the land value. The building had no value, and the operations had negative value. But I still, on the day of the opening of the project, when I did not notice that the opposition was there, I had no hesitation in congratulating the former government. And I do it here today publicly as well. For doing whatever it could have been done to make that project happen, because it's a good thing. And I don't care if it's Labour or a Martian that made it happen. Once it benefits the people of St. Lucia, my party, the United Workers' Party, will support it. Talk about range. I've dealt with that. The deal was done in 2014. You're coming 4 days before the elections to be able to announce it. But we heard a truth here today, Madam Speaker. It's a very important truth. And sometimes people get lost in their exuberance and their emotions. It often happens to my friend, my learned friend from Labrie. He often likes to hear himself speak, and he's very poetic. But he said something that was important. He said that we're interested in giving people jobs to brush the teeth of horses' mouths and to groom horses. That tells you how far away from reality that he is. Because I've met a lot of young people, my constituency, in fact in his constituency as well, that cannot wait for the project to happen. That in fact, they're the ones laughing at us, wearing the jacket and ties, and having to go to the offices. They have no interest in that. And I would suggest to my learned colleague, the ability to see the relationship between a human being and a horse, and the skill set that's required, is awesome. It's awesome. to see these incredible animals, and as powerful as they are, and to see somebody take control of that horse. And the opportunity that it's going to create for them. When I go, not just in St. Lucia, Madam Speaker, I went to Trinidad, I was in Jamaica, I was in Barbados, I was in Antigua, and I was amazed as to how many young people came up to me who recognized me and said, PM, there's one thing you're doing in St. Lucia. See that horse racing track? Boy, that is exciting. That is exciting. And who wish that their government would be doing the same thing. But yet, the ambition that we have cannot be celebrated or recognized by the other side, because they're too accustomed to living in mediocrity. So I want to change a little bit, Madam Speaker. We have the list of projects that we have from the World Bank. And there was a project that was started, actually, Mr. King, I think that you were the one who started that project, the St. Lucia Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. So after Thomas and the dust had settled a little bit, the then government, led by Mr. King, proposed to the World Bank to borrow almost $71 million in order to be able to finish up works, to be able to restore the infrastructure of St. Lucia. After all the paperwork was done, the project was approved. One was approved on the 4th of June, 2014, $36 million. Another one was approved the 16th of July, 2014, $12 million. Another one was approved on the 4th of June again for $15 million. So when you take those three projects, the one for $36 million that was approved in the 4th of June, only $6.8 million have been disbursed, leaving an outstanding amount of $29 million or $30 million, US dollars. The one that started on the 16th of July of $12 million, to date, $1.9 million has been disbursed. The undisbursed amount is $10 million. And the amount of $15 million in 4th of June 2014, of the $15 million, only $2.9 million has been disbursed, leaving an outstanding amount of $12.1 million. So let's add it up. 30 plus 10 is 40, plus 12 is $52 million. $52 million, Madam Speaker, US, sitting there. And you want to come and talk about infrastructure and how much you care about the people of this country and how of a good government and how transparent you are? I know exactly how they think. Alan Chastanet and the United Workers' Party are wicked people, not letting me speak. I want to remind them on the other side, 7 people have spoken already on this budget from the United Workers' Party. 7. And all they have is had 3. But you see, they want to have their cake and eat it. They continuously believe that they're still in government. For the member of Labrie to try to put words in the mouth of the public and to threaten this government that if we don't follow their rules and don't embrace their policies, that there's going to be hell to be paid. But there's a thing in St. Lucia, Madam Speaker. I've come to know it well. It's called the silent majority. The silent majority. And they spoke in June in large numbers. Madam Speaker, the other things that were indicated by the other side that I felt I needed to be able to respond to, Madam Speaker, First of all, with regards to our position on the different statutory bodies, the St. Lucian Marketing Board. We have highlighted that there is a deficiency, that there is a cause to be concerned at the St. Lucian Marketing Board. Because you have an agency that is benefiting from duty-free incentives, unlike any of the other importing agencies in St. Lucia. And despite given that advantage, continues to run in a deficit. And we've indicated that we are going to examine it critically and that we're going to determine its future. If in fact we knew what we would have done, we would have announced it. But you see, the labor, they're impatient. They have to rush up ahead. They want to try to anticipate because they want you to do a thing that they can go out and say that you're wrong. The St. Lucia Fisheries Market. We have all kinds of people selling fish in St. Lucia. And the fact is, it is clear to the naked eye that there is something wrong with the structure of the fishing market. And again, millions of dollars are being advanced to the fisheries complex in the hopes that every time that they'll be able to repay the money. $14 million has been lent to them, with the hope that they're going to repay it. So again, what have we said? We're going to determine the future of the fisheries cooperative. Nobody's made any pronouncements, but we've said there's enough red flags there for us to be concerned. Radio St. Lucia. When even some of the people who are the most determined people, the people who have put sweat and equity into Radio St. Lucia, got to hear for themselves and see the numbers that we saw, they themselves could not defend Radio St. Lucia. And there's a word that we continuously use, Madam Speaker, because they believe that it's a word that is going to frighten us all. Because they like to wave the flag when they have to wave, called patrimony. And they talk about the patrimony of Radio St. Lucia, Madam Speaker. And the patrimony, in my mind, is the archives. It's the archaeological history of Radio St. Lucia. All those great interviews, all those historical moments in our country, which is our patrimony. But we collectively cared about it so much that those archives and that hard drive, guess where it was? In a chicken coop outside of Radio St. Lucia. And in fact, the weather has deteriorated to the extent we don't even know that we'll be able to recover it. The Minister of Broadcasting, former Minister of Broadcasting, who holds the flag high, talks about the patrimony of this country. That when you go physically to the building of Radio St. Lucia, that the leak in the roof was so bad it rotted the floor and they cannot even use the kitchen. They cannot use upstairs. That we're talking about having to spend $8 million just to bring it back into operation. And then the question becomes, bring it back into operation to do what? To compete against the private sector? So let me say this to you. I don't need to make this document a document in the House, Madam Speaker, because it already is. This is the 1998-1999 budget statement by Dr. D. Kenny Anthony. Here's what he said on page 16. Mr. Speaker, in recent years, it has become fashionable for governments to argue that the responsibility for generating investment, employment, and growth in the economy must be shared with the private sector. Indeed, previous administrations have adopted the policy position that theirs was the responsibility for setting the enabling economic environment, while the private sector should be the primary engine of growth and development. In practice, however, this has not been observed. Until May of 1997, what passed for government in this country operated exactly in the opposite manner. The former government, meaning the United Workers' Party under Sir John, monopolized the investment agenda, undertaking ill-conceived and ill-advised projects in the private domain. Many of these projects were undertaken without appropriate dialogue or discussion, drawing down indiscriminately on financial resources which should have been available to other sectors in the economy. Here's the interesting part. Such action has the effect of crowding out the private initiative and setting up all sorts of nefarious bodies in areas where government has little commercial advantage and even less chance of financial viability. 1998, 1999. Let me go on to show this, Madam Speaker. On page 101, Madam Speaker, the state of statutory boards. Mr. Speaker, during my presentation of the supplementary budget to this Honorable House, I spoke of the serious economic challenges confronting our statutory corporations and the preponderance of archaic management systems in these parastatals. Permit me to take a cross-section slice across the autonomy of our parastatals to describe to you the extent to which this disease of financial mismanagement and lack of accountability had spread. The Water and Sewage Authority, which is responsible for attending to two of the most basic needs of our people, has outstanding liabilities of $110 million. The National Development Corporation, our nation's premier investment promotion and business facilitation agency, has an annual revenue shortfall of $5 million and a long-term debt of almost $40 million due to the NDC's inability to meet its financial obligations. The government has, over the past 8 months, paid in excess of $4 million to the Caribbean Development Bank on behalf of NDC. The St. Lucia Broadcasting Authority, the victim of much interference by the previous administration, has an outstanding liability of over $1.61 million. Madam Speaker, 1998, 1999. The financial problems of the Dennery Farm Co. have reached critical, if not fatal, proportions. This statutory body recorded major financial deficits of 15 of its 18 years of operation. Yet its problems were never attended to by the previous administration. The current liability of this company is over $5.8 million, and before its operations were shut down a few weeks ago, should I repeat that again? Before its operations were shut down, the monthly operation deficit averaged over $80,000 a month. The St. Lucia Livestock Development Company has a total liability of $4.1 million, and for almost 2 years had not been able to finance its loans with the Caribbean Food Corporation. The future viability of this company is presently under threat. The cumulative debt of the St. Lucia Housing Authority for the year ending 1997 was $7.5 million. The St. Lucia Banana Growers Association, debt perhaps one of which our nation is most familiar, currently stands at over $40 million. The extent of the financial mismanagement of our statutory corporations is perhaps most clearly seen in the case of the Fish Marketing Corporation. I remind you, Madam Speaker, 1998, 1999. This statutory body, which enjoys an enviable monopoly position in the lucrative business of importing and selling seafood, had at the end of the year deficit in 1995 in excess of $170,000. By the end of 1996, this deficit had grown to $275,000. The imposition of stricter financial management practice resulted in the Fish Marketing Corporation erasing its deficit, recording the end of the year surplus of $187,000, a turnaround of over $450,000. Mr. Speaker, My government is committed to the eradication of the financial mismanagement and the political, listen to this one, the political interference that previously characterized the governance of our statutory corporations. Really? This is why a great Calypsonian, Bingo, wrote the song, "There are two prime ministers in our country." Because he writes and says all the right things. In fact, when I went through this document, there is a proposed increase in the gas tax. On page 27, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is our view that collecting road and vehicle user fees via petroleum tax is a more efficient and more equitable mechanism. Tourism. We've been lambasted about increasing the tax. It's amazing, you know, how history repeats itself, Madam Speaker. On page 25, Mr. Speaker, as part of the marketing effort in tourism, government agreed to make a one-time contribution to American Airlines of US 1.5 million. Already the tourism industry has begun to benefit from this measure. This is the same government who continuously says subsidizing airlift is wrong. Already the tourism industry has begun to benefit by this measure. Airline seats to St. Lucia from Miami are solidly booked. To finance this expenditure, the airport service charge will be restructured and increased. Effective May 1st, 1998, nationals, and listen to this, it's incredible, you know. Nationals will be required to pay EC $35, while non-nationals will pay EC $40. So the recognition that we can have a dual rate was already recognized by that then government. And yet they had no fear in putting the tax, and there was no concerns that it was going to dampen our market. But yet now, they'll make all solutions believe that what we're committing is sacrilege, that we're committing suicide. What was very interesting, Madam Speaker, is because you didn't have to go very far, was in the first page. It says, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the presentation of this budget has benefited from a program of financial reform and management currently underway in the Ministry of Finance. Sound financial management, and I want solutions to listen to this carefully, because this is a government that was elected on a euphoria for change. This is their first major budget speech because they had a what do you call it, a supplementary budget. So this was their first grandiose one. So this was their platform of where they wanted to go. And we all now have the benefit, Madam Speaker, of looking back in hindsight. We can go back and reflect on these words and ask ourselves, did they deliver? Because clearly when you read this, they understood economics. They understood politics. Implementation deficit. So it says, sound financial management of the state's resources provides a strong foundation for proper accountability. As far as the citizens of this country are concerned, they pay taxes in the full expectation that resources raised by the government will be used for the services that are beneficial to this society. That they will raise taxes with the full expectation that it will resound to their benefit. Did you all see, did the people see any benefit to the increase of the gas by 66%? When they introduced VAT of 15%, and increased revenue by, I think it's over $300 million. Did the hospitals get better, Madam Speaker? Did the quality of our education system get better? I'm at pains to explain to St. Lucians what we inherited. And if I'm criticized for not taking enough time to allowing St. Lucians to truly understand what we inherited. But as I said in a speech 2 nights ago, I don't propose or pretend to be dexterous. I have found I can only do one thing at a time. I can either talk or I can walk. And I've chosen what the people of St. Lucia need at this time is walking. And I trust that the silent majority respects and understands that, and are going to measure me not by the words, not by the words that we've put down, but by our actions. That is what we want to be measured by. That is what we want to be measured by. So when you increase the VAT, where's the benefits? When we came in, Madam Speaker, not one of the Coast Guard boats were working. Not one. The radar systems to be able to anticipate and detect people coming in illegally, none of them were working. There was no DPP. The DPP's office did not even have the requisite number of lawyers, computers, paper clips, nothing. That the forensic lab that you boasted so much about, you allowed it to close. Magistrates had to use their vehicles as their officers. And it was on the commitment of them that justice was carried out. No assistance of the judicial system. Judges don't have chambers. They don't have the requisite administrative support. That judges involved in criminal cases are sitting in a courthouse in which literally the jury is sitting on their lap, and 5 feet away from them is the accused. This is not exaggerations. That is the reality of what we've inherited. Jury sitting on their lap. The lap of justice. There was a period of time, Madam Speaker, and you know that, you're a lawyer, in which you didn't know which place to go to hear your case. If I'm lying, tell me so. How many cases were adjourned because people didn't even know where the court case was going to be or heard? You go to schools and the sewage system is not working, the roof is leaking, the windows have never been opened, the furniture has not been redone. And the list goes on. We talk about after-school programs and sports. Where is it? Are we going to lie to ourselves, Madam Speaker? Come with me on a school day at 2:30 and stay here in Constitutional Park and see for yourself where our young people are going. Go online and see the videos that are being peddled around to see what the young people are using their creativity for. That is what we inherited. This is a government that when it came into government knew better. It said, as far as the citizens of this country are concerned, they pay taxes in the full expectation that resources so raised by the government will be used for the services that are beneficial to this society. Can the farmers say that? Can even our criminals say that? We built Beau Saint-Just. Not Beau Saint, what's it called? Bordelais. And did we build Bordelais to help the judicial system? But it's overcrowded. Is it that you need to get a degree in psychology or sociology to understand that when you take a young man of 17 years of age or 18 years of age who may have broken into somebody's house, I don't support that, and you send him to Bordelais on remand because his family cannot afford the legal support, or he cannot afford the bond to get out, and you leave him to lament there for how many years? And you expect him to come out holding the flag? Is that what we expect, Madam Speaker? Is that a reasonable expectation from society? They expected that those entrusted with the responsibility for providing these services will at all times be accountable for the proper use of the resources made available to them. At all times. Rochamel. Were the resources of the state accounted for? NCA. Were the resources accounted for? The cost overruns on the highways, not by the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions. Was the state resources accounted for? I didn't bring it with me today, Madam Speaker, but the audit department did an audit of the traffic department. And it's sad. I believe the number was approximately only 5% of the traffic tickets issued were actually collected. There's a systemic breakdown in government of accountability. Nobody's being held accountable. I went to Inland Revenue. It was exactly the same day when it first opened. In fact, the carpet had turned from red to burgundy because it was the same carpet from the 80s. So the entities that are supposed to be putting those processes in to ensure the accountability of funds, it is almost as if they were deliberately undermined. For what interest, I don't know. I'll leave that for the public to determine. Government stewardship of public resources calls for full accountability and transparency on the part of public service managers and all other officials entrusted with the public duties and responsibilities. The people in turn expect that those upon whom such authority is conferred will use it responsibly and that they will in all times remain fully accountable to the people. There's many more passages I can read from this. But it seems like an entirely different party wrote this document. Because in fact, if I didn't give you the name of it, you would have thought it was Sir John Compton and United Workers' Party that wrote that document. Because these are the same principles that we use. So, Madam Speaker, I have presented, and my government has presented, a budget that's a transitionary budget. Yes, we have a deficit this year. But the intention is to be able to grow this economy. And unlike what my learned friend from Labrie indicated, that that's a huge risk, we on this side don't think so. Just this weekend, Madam Speaker, we had the opportunity of doing a press launch for the opening of the 4th Sandos property, which promises to be their first 6-star property in St. Lucia, which will be 330 rooms. And my government will do everything we can to make sure that construction can start before the end of this year. On the 29th of June, that we're going to be down in the great constituency of Choiseul and Saltibus. in which we're looking to break ground on a 200-room hotel at Savasha. In August, we intend to be able to make another announcement as to who the management contract is going to be given to on the Black Bay project. That I am comfortable in saying that we're well advanced in our negotiations and commitments on the Canals project for 350 rooms. I'm excited at the fact that the Rex property, the two owners died, the Karayas, and the properties now have been vested into the trust, and the trust now has agreed to demolish the existing Rex property and to build back a Hilton hotel of 350 rooms and to redo the Royal Solution and add another 50 rooms to make it 500 rooms. And including as part of that project, they're going to be assisting us in putting together a master plan for the Rodney Bay and Grosley area. And that we can create even more opportunities. The Sandals Group has also...
Honorable Prime Minister, you now have 15 minutes within which to conclude your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Sandals Group has also purchased the golf course. No. And purchased the golf course. And they're now in the process of adding a conference facility, more restaurants. They're also going to be putting in squash courts and tennis courts. And I was very excited to hear the press interview with the Minister of Tourism, and I must congratulate the Minister of Tourism. Not only in creating the environment in which people want to invest in this country, but the fact is that in a very difficult time, that St. Lucia's tourism arrivals are up over 20%. And I must specifically say to him, thank you. Because while he's been doing that, we've been transitioned into a new tourism authority. And things are helter-skelter. And he is now, with the assistance of the new events company, put on the new Soleil Festival. And he's done it without having much resources. And I want to say that. He has never complained. And the people in the tourism authority have never complained. They have gotten on with the job. And they are doing it well. And I congratulate you on that. I want to talk a little bit about the DSH project. You know, Madam Speaker, evidence will start coming out as to how involved the former government actually was in the DSH project. Because the people who introduced me to Mr. Tia King is actually the Labour Party. And in fact, a lot of the things that they are fighting in the so-called framework agreement originated with them. In fact, to deal with my issues with what they're bringing up, I decided I may have to go out and employ a new person. And I found out that there is a person that's called a fixer. So when high net worth people have difficulties, they go and find them. And members on the other side will know what I'm talking about. And hopefully maybe the name and what the fixer was doing will come to light. But it's interesting. The DSH project and what Mr. Tia King's role is going to be in that project, Madam Speaker, is that we have agreed to put together jointly a master plan for the South. It is my government's belief that trying to go out and get investors on a piecemeal basis, meaning identify a piece of land and trying to sell that piece of land and get a developer, is much more difficult than when you can show people a comprehensive plan and show that the government is committed to doing something radically different. I'm at pains to keep repeating that Mr. Tia King, because of his history in horse racing, gives us the opportunity to get into that industry at the highest level. That his horses just ran in the Kentucky Derby and won. His horses ran in the Preakness. His horses run all around the world. And that when I went to China, and I got to meet the Russians, and I got to meet the Australians, and the Irish people, and the people from Kentucky, I recognized that he's revered. So when you have the opportunity now like Formula One car racing, that we're getting involved in an international industry that brings with it exposure. So even without anything being spent as yet, an investor from Trinidad, Mr. Chin, who owns Movietown, and for those St. Lucians who have been to Trinidad and who've been to Movietown and see what that development is all about, he has rushed to St. Lucia to come to invest because of the horse racing track. What he has done is he was the chairman of the horse racing club in Trinidad, and he himself owns 11 horses. And so it's attracting a high net worth individual that we would not have otherwise been able to bring. This is the same principle that a golf course does. A golf course doesn't make money, but everything around the golf course makes money. The golf course helps improve the quality or the value of land. It draws people and creates the visibility. So even when you now have a golf tournament and you're on TV. So this horse racing track is going to create jobs for young people at all different levels. And the one I keep on saying that we're underestimating is the broadcasting. Because every single week we're going to be showing the horse races on TV, which will be aired throughout all the betting holes in the world. Whether it's in Vegas, whether it's in London, whether it's in France, whether it's in Germany, Austria, Australia, all around the world. And we have the opportunity of promoting our destination. But I don't expect the Labour Party to see all those things, because the Labour Party is blinded by success. Instead of accepting the fact that they have failed, that they started with a promise that they did not deliver on in any way, and instead of their party going internally and saying, where have we gone wrong? And what changes do we have to make in order that this party can deliver to the people of St. Lucia whatever vision they have? And I'm not going to tell them what that vision is. But no, it's easier to blame everybody else. It's easier to deny other people the opportunity for prosperity. That's what's easier. It's easier to criticize. Ojo Labs. I mean, I have to use my American parochialism and say, oh my God, really? That you can't understand that? That we're bringing a company here that's bringing a new technology that is not anywhere else in the world. First time it's being launched is the use of artificial intelligence with a call center. It's being launched in America in the real estate industry. And that we were lucky enough to make that happen. And I can tell you exactly how it happened. The same gentleman, Mr. David Rubin, was involved in a company here called Yodel. And Yodel employed 150 young people, Madam Speaker, in BZ. K12. K2. And they personally trained those young people to be able to make phone calls to Americans. And they gave them a 40-minute selling pitch. And were able to convince the business people in the States to buy the software program for $15,000. And they did it as cost-effectively as their American counterparts. I was impressed. And in fact, if you look at the United Workers' Party manifesto, you will see that we have call centers in there. And it is out of the conversations with Yodel and Mr. Rubin that we had already started to plan in opposition what we were going to do. Unknowns to me is that when we came into government, weeks afterwards, Yodel was sold for $333 million. And the new company decided to transfer its call center from St. Lucia to Nova Scotia. And it's when I was going to Dallas to meet with American Airlines, I said, I heard that Mr. Rubin now was in Austin, Texas. Let me go and see him. I went to see him. And then this is when he told me about his new company with Ojo Labs. And I said, is there any space for St. Lucia, David? He said, well, you came at the right time. What are you prepared to offer? I said, we will give you a free building for 3 years. We will build out the building for you. We'll put out the capital expenditure to create exactly what you have here in Austin, Texas. Not one standard less than what you have. And that we're willing to subsidize your staff for a year and a half. That for the first 6 months, we will contribute $1,000 to the salary of somebody working in Ojo Labs. And then for the next 6 months, we will contribute $500. And then for the last 6 months, we will contribute $500. And we will do that up to 4 years. So anybody who is employed for the first time in Ojo Labs for the first 4 years, we as a government will help subsidize their salaries to get that young person's into the operation. In addition to that, Ojo said, let us create a joint venture company, because we believe that with the success of what we're going to have, an opportunity to get other companies who are going to emulate what we're doing to move to St. Lucia is there. And because Ojo will be the example they're going to be using, that we can now convince them to come to St. Lucia. So that in our training, we're going to start training young people to build up an inventory of young people who now can facilitate that new investment. Let us compare that to NICE. That you paid a person $1,500 a month, supposedly for 1 year, to give them job experience. But instead, you ended up paying them $1,500 a month with 1 year contract, and the same person was given another contract, and the same person was given another contract. If that was me, I would have the expectation that I have a job. But it was never described as a job. It was described as an opportunity. And what about all the other young people who wanted to get that opportunity? So where was the transparency? That those people were employed by whom, Madam Speaker? By a project that did not fall under the government. It was in the Prime Minister's office. The director reported directly to him. They had no accountability to anybody in government. They employed who they wanted. So it gives the impression that it was political. So when we now say 6,000 jobs have been lost, I ask my fellow St. Lucians, if in fact we have come in and we have been so reckless to have lost 6,000 jobs, how is it that the unemployment rate has dropped to 20%? It's simple math. Because in fact, if we lost 6,000 jobs, it means we must have replaced them with over 10,000 jobs. And that those people who have gotten the jobs have earned it on their own merit. They have needed no politician to get them in the job. Our job is to create the environment for you to get jobs. But you must go and apply yourself. You must be willing to make the sacrifices. Do not allow the politicians to be part of that.
Honorable Prime Minister, you now have 5 minutes within which to conclude.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I have to say to you that even though we have not even begun all of our projects entirely, that we're seeing more than green fields. And I want to say to you that what we're going to be doing in youth and sports is going to be revolutionary. And instead of having a minister's account, we're going to have the account for the sports people. That's who the account is going to be. That we have a Minister of Agriculture who knows what he's about. And that we see banana production. He's talking about that bananas are falling down, but at least they are bananas being grown to fall down. Under them, there was none. They took 120,000 bananas. That's what Sir John left them. And before they even got into government, the same salvation group he's talking about. Salvation whom? The salvation for themselves and salvation for the Labour Party, but not for the banana growers. And any banana grower who is still alive today during those days knew that they were given oranges to hold, that they were lied to. They were promised all kinds of prices for the bananas. What did they get? Nothing. They got a good kick in the backside. The only party that has delivered to the people of St. Lucia has been the United Workers' Party. And the values that were instilled by Sir John and Alan Bousquet, George Mallet, that we want to build on those values. We have an education system that's in dire need. We've had several meetings, and we're hoping to be able to announce a new university in St. Lucia in the culinary arts and in wellness. We're recognizing that sending young people to get tertiary level educations without making sure they have requisite jobs is sending them to a penance, because it means they've inherited debt and no way of paying it back. We must emulate Germany and Switzerland, in which they are skills training, Madam Chairman. Skills training. If you're going to be an expert in a particular industry, you don't necessarily have to have a tertiary level education. But if you're going to make your country productive, it's those skills. But you know, Madam Speaker, I know they don't understand what we're talking about. Because even the subtle skills that is required to be able to take care of a horse, and the pride that goes in that, they cannot appreciate. They would rather deny the people of St. Lucia for their own selfish reasons. And they would rather demean the people. But they did it in tourism. When tourism was prospering, they talked about menial jobs. That's what they talked about, is menial jobs. And they're the ones who do the most psychological damage to hold St. Lucians back. But St. Lucians are smarter. And I'm so happy that our party, while we were in opposition, that we had those internal discussions. We were not scared to speak frankly with each other. We didn't always agree, but we eventually found a position in which we could agree on. And that we didn't wait to get in government to have a plan. So the only surprise for me, Madam Speaker, was when I came into government to find out that this year that we have to turn over $800 million in debt. Let me explain to St. Lucians what that means. That there's a ratio normally we use to determine how often you have to turn over your debt. So if you have a bond, when it becomes to maturity and you're supposed to pay it back. When we left government, it was in excess of 10 years. We've come back to government to find out now it's 4.3 years. So every 4 years, you have to turn over 100% of your debt. So this year, you have to turn over $800 million. And we know what's taking place in Barbados. The fact is the Barbados economy is not doing well. And fact is the confidence in the Barbados economy by the private sector is not strong. And we've seen that when they have those kinds of shocks in the system, that it has possibly an impact on us. So we must give the confidence to the business people and to the financiers that St. Lucia is on solid ground. We were helped. There was a rebasing or recalculation of our GDP. Because what was said was that the GDP did not include the value of properties in it. And as a result, our GDP now has been reevaluated to be 16% higher. So instead of having a debt to GDP of 81%, we now have a debt to GDP of 66%. Now, while that is gratifying, it doesn't mean we're out of the problems. We're still running a deficit. And it's the intention of this government to grow the base of the economy. Because it's simple. The people who are earning money currently cannot afford to pay any more taxes. As it is, people in the middle income have lost their homes, are no longer driving cars. And if you overtax on your high-end earners, they have the ability of going somewhere else. So the only way that we can solve this problem is by making sure that more people, Madam Speaker, are benefiting from the resources of the state. And that people can pay as they go, not in advance. And that we're not accumulating the debt. So when I say to people that the patrimony of our country is measurable to our credit rating, what do I mean by that? Because I know what they like to interpret it as. In 1997, if you took the total amount of debt that we had as a country and you divided it by the population, it was $2,700 that every St. Lucian owed. At the end of 2016, after 20 years of the Labour government, and you divide the total debt we have, it's $17,000. It went up 500%. And I don't mind if it went up 500% if there's something to show for it. But in addition to being in further debt, the quality of life in this country has gone down. So, Madam Speaker, I'm very proud to say I'm excited about this project, of this budget. I want the people of St. Lucia to know that we on this side are committed to seeing them get out of the mediocrity and the level of debt and hopelessness that they're in. And I know many of you, when I see you, have already started to feel the benefit. Yeah. Even the same Soleil that we took so much criticism for. I'm so heartened the fact that this weekend, when people saw the Reggae and Soul Festival and have started to understand that for the same $14 million on one event, we're now going to put on 6 events. And that so many more people could benefit. That is one example of where this government is going. And I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.